Hi everyone, good afternoon and welcome to our QualiWare Users Group meeting for November. My name is Cecile, I'm with CloseReach, and I'd like to welcome all of you to today's meeting. The agenda for today, we're going to go through introductions, which we've just done. Then I'm going to hand things over to Kevin O'Rourke to do some CloseReach news. Our featured presentation today is Logan Baillie from Barrington Consulting on metric-based process mapping. And we're going to have a community update from James Cheong from CBSA. And then we're saving the best for last, teasing Dragos. We're going to have Dragos from our CloseReach customer success team go through a QualiWare tooltip for everyone. So Kevin, I'd like to pass things over to you.
Great, thanks very much, Cecile, and welcome everybody to our last meeting before Christmas. Still waiting for snow here in Ottawa. Anyhow, in terms of news, we had a great BPAC awareness session, and for those that don't know what that means, it's business process analysis and costing that was put on by Landmark and ourselves to to talk about how organizations can mine their processes and look at their costs and change their operational views of their business. And Logan's going to talk about some of that stuff. Anyhow, we had 38 people attending the meeting, which was a half-day session, and that's great. We have a video from that that's been turned into an on-demand course on a YouTube channel that we'll post in the chat here, as well as it'll be posted shortly on the CloseReach website and our YouTube channel as well. We have upcoming training, December 14 to 16, 3 afternoons. We have an Enhancing Lean with BPAC workshop. So, taking that awareness session and to the next level. And early January 17 to 19, 4 afternoons, we have a CBP modeler workshop where you'll be hands-on with the collaborative business planning tool, modeling tool in QualiWare to build the models and that are associated with BPAC. And then February 21 to 24, we have 4 afternoons on implementing BPAC in in an organizational setting. So CloseReach is now an implementation partner, and so we're looking to promote all of this training to to enhance the uptake on the software and the methodology behind it. So Compliance Management Accelerator update. We are continuing to enhance the base tool, the base repository that we put together to assist organizations with compliance management. We've expanded the initial scope of that, which was ISO 9001 and 27001 information system security, to also include 17025, as well as 14001 and 45000. Well, so employee health and safety, or occupational health and safety rather, and one of the environmental standards. So what we're doing is the accelerator, will make it much easier for organizations to get away from all the things that everybody faces in architecture, lots of spreadsheets, into an integrated system implemented in QualiWare. So that's an ongoing activity, and we actually had our user group meeting about a week and a half ago, and our next one is for the compliance and quality management is scheduled for February. Next item, we're hiring. If you haven't seen from my LinkedIn, we're looking for more analysts and architects, as well as technical and sales staff to support our plans for growing this year. So if you're aware of anybody who through COVID or whatever is in a situation where they're looking for work and they're good people, we've got a good referral program running. So next item, end of year contracting. We're almost at the end of the calendar year, but end of fiscal is just over that hump at Christmas there. So for organizations that are looking at additional resourcing for services or software, you know what it gets like starting January, February timeframe, things get tight. So anything that you can do to push that forward earlier, we'll work with you to get that through contracting, through procurement, which, obviously has its own delays. The next item that we're looking at actually is concerning the next meeting. So we're currently investigating the use of Microsoft Teams to run our user group meetings in the future. We're doing some analysis and testing right now. GoToTraining, the product that we use, for this meeting, it's difficult for people from National Defense, CRA, and some other departments to get access to this other than through their own private machines. So Teams is very broadly used now. So we're going, as I say, we're looking at being able to use that to deliver these sessions in the future. So look for more news on that to be coming out in January. And other than that, I guess I'd like to wish everyone all the best for Christmas and New Year's, a safe holiday, and we'll cross our fingers that the newest variant isn't too serious. So thanks very much for attending today.
Great. Thank you.
Over to you, Cecile.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay, next on our agenda is Mr. Logan Baillie. And we're very pleased to have Logan joining us today from Barrington Consulting. And Logan's going to be presenting a metric-based process mapping to drive process improvement. Logan will highlight how to combine data and process mapping to support rapid continuous improvement efforts. Metric-based process mapping is the predecessor to formally creating electronic process maps, business process accounting and costing models, or creating any simulation. And therefore, it's a tool that you'll definitely want to have in your continuous improvement toolbox. Logan is a Lean Six Sigma Black Belt with Barrington, and he's based in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and is a colleague of Mike Haley. Mike and Logan are working on a consulting engagement on disability pension processing at Veterans Affairs Canada using the methodology that Logan will be talking to us about today. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you all to Logan, and we're going to execute the technical feat of changing presenters, which is always fun when you're doing it live. So Logan, I'm going to make you presenter.
Perfect.
And welcome you to our user group meeting. And thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I'm just going to bring this so I can see. Perfect. Okay, awesome. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you, everyone. Happy to be here and looking forward to sharing this presentation with you today. So as Cecile mentioned, my name, if I can skip there, is Logan Baillie. I'm a senior consultant with Barrington Consulting. I've been working in the continuous improvement and Lean Six Sigma space for over 5 years now. My background is in industrial engineering, and I graduated with my bachelor's at Dalhousie University. And currently, I'm pursuing my master's in analytics through Georgia Tech part-time. I joined the Barrington Ops team which is a specific division at Barrington focused on operational and performance services in 2020. And in that time, I've gotten to really work with a variety of industries, including the public sector at the federal, provincial, and municipal level. I've gotten to work in aerospace, finance, healthcare, and even a bit of food processing. So over those projects and over my time at Barrington, I've gotten to use a lot of the Lean Six Sigma tools, and one of which is metric-based process mapping, or even process mapping in general. And so I'm excited to share that with you today, and how it's evolved, and how there's some great technology you can use out there for this specific tool. So the objectives for today, I'd like you to understand the concept of a metrics-based process map and how the use of data can enhance your traditional approach to process mapping. I would like you to be aware or be able to complete a simple metrics-based process map. We might not go over all the details of all the different icons, but you should be able to create a relatively simple metrics-based process map at the end of today. And then I'd also like you to be aware of some of the tools that are available to support metrics-based process mapping, and how these maps can be further enhanced for process modeling and costing. Right, so the agenda. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with a bit of a background. So I'll take us through some Lean Six Sigma. If you've never heard of it, or if you don't know much about it, no worries. What I'd like to do is take you through a bit of background. I won't spend too much time on it. And then what we'll do is we'll get into the process mapping piece. So we'll look at the traditional approaches, so traditional process mapping, and then we'll compare that with metrics-based process mapping to see what that looks like and see what the advantages are of the metrics-based approach. I'll share some real-life examples that have been completed using metrics-based process mapping. And then we'll talk about how it integrates with business process analysis and costing. And then finally, we'll have some time for some questions and wrap up at the very end. Alrighty, so we'll start off with the Lean Six Sigma background. And before we get there, what we'll do is we'll talk about the 4 Ps of an organizational performance management system. And so this is the 4 Ps are a model that we use in our training. We believe strongly in it. And basically what the 4 Ps mean are the 4 pillars, right, of the organizational performance management system. Those are those outer 4 squares you see here in this slide. The first one is the purpose or the philosophy of the organization. That has to be well defined. That's your mission, that's your vision, that's where you want to go. How you get there is through your people, right? And that can be your staff, your senior management, or maybe even your external partners that you work with. So those people need to know what the purpose of the organization is so that they know what they should be doing to move in the right direction. And that connection is what we call performance excellence. That's your effectiveness. That's doing the right things. And to do those things, the right things, we have to conduct work through a series of processes and policies. And that brings us to our 3rd P down in the bottom right, our process and policies. These can often be technology enabled. And so what we need to do is our people are working in those processes day to day. So that's working in the business. That's our daily management. And then, of course, in order to make sure that we're able to do things well, right, that we're overall efficient, we need a system in place for identifying and capturing improvement opportunities and then acting on those. And so that's the 4th P, the problem solving and identification in the bottom left, or the possibilities of what we could do. Right? And that's our operational excellence. That's our efficiency. That's making sure you're doing things right. And that's the key focus of Lean Six Sigma. And so Lean Six Sigma actually is born out of 2 methodologies. So the first one that we see is Lean. So Lean dates back to the Toyota production system back in the 1950s, 1960s. And it's really evolved over time. And what it is, it's a way of doing business that drives a culture. And Toyota is really set on driving this culture of continuous improvement and service excellence. And so they developed a series of systems and frameworks and tools and principles known as the Toyota Production System, which has evolved over time because of the applicability to many industries outside of the manufacturing industry. And so really at its core, what Lean is looking to do is improve the value for our clients or our customers, and those can be internal and external customers. We want to improve the way that we work, so being more efficient, identify and eliminate unnecessary steps, and streamline the process. So we want to eliminate waste, and I'll explain what waste means here in a minute. And overall, we want to enable end-to-end process and performance excellence. For those of you that are project managers out there, or have any PM experience, you might know the triple constraint. Well, what you can see is Lean looking to do is we want to increase our quality and our capacity, and we want to reduce the cost and the time required to do that. So that's Lean. Then we have Six Sigma. So Six Sigma actually comes from Motorola, and Six Sigma does have a meaning. It comes from stats, and it was developed by a set of statisticians at Motorola. And so a Six Sigma level means that you have 3.4 defects per million opportunities. And so that was the standard of quality that Motorola was seeking to achieve. And so over time, what happened is the two methodologies really do go hand in hand. So they actually eventually merged to become one methodology. And the series of tools and principles are now seen as one. And so when Lean Six Sigma is typically used in an organization for a project, right, we typically see some standard things. So before the implementation or before the use of a project, we might see that we're not able to hit our service commitments. So we're not able to deliver enough product or process enough applications or deliver enough grants, whatever that may be, by a certain date. You may also see that our ability to meet our customer requirements is all over the place. There's a lot of variation in the process. We're not being very repeatable. So in essence, what's happening is you might see some underperformance and maybe some even unhappy customers. These usually trigger, in an organization that has adopted Lean Six Sigma, what it does is that would trigger the use of a project so that we can look to alleviate that problem. And after that project is complete, what we would expect to see is we'd be faster and more efficient. So we'd be able to better meet our service commitments. That's where Lean comes in. And we've reduced our variability, right? So our quality has increased. So our ability to meet our customer requirements is much tighter on our target. So this, of course, leads to satisfied customers and overall increased value for the customer. And what we refer to this as we hope to seek and obtain capable and stable processes. They're capable of meeting our customer demands and expectations, and they're stable. They're consistently able to do so. So in the Lean Six Sigma world, there are a series of multiple methodologies that you may have heard of, and that's okay. I'll just provide a quick background on some of them. So the first one on the left is the quick wins. Right? And so these are the simplest of projects. They usually have very little risk. It's something that you can change with little time or little risk, right? We could go do it tomorrow, and if it didn't work out, we could always easily revert back without really any risk or adverse events. The second type of project, which is a bit more complex than a quick win, is a Kaizen event. Some people may call these rapid improvement workshops. And so what these seek to do is they'll seek to bring the team together to dive into the process over a series of a day or a couple days and identify and implement some improvements. So these usually require a bit more conversation and have a bit more complexity or risk than the quick wins, which is why we need the consultation. Okay, and then the third methodology is the DMAIC methodology, which you may have heard of before. This is focused around process improvement. These are more complex projects, and we need to go through a series of phases to make sure we truly define the project and then are creating improvements that really do solve the problem and that we're able to sustain. So we're going to focus, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the DMAIC because it's usually the one people have heard most about and that we see most often. So the DMAIC methodology stands for define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. And each of these are a phase that you would go through throughout a project in order to complete said project. And so this really ensures that we're taking the time, the due diligence to define the project, make sure we truly understand what's valuable from the customer's point of view. What is it that the business needs? What is that voice of the business and the reason we should take on this project? Making sure those two things are well understood so that we can go about completing a meaningful project. Then we get into measure, and this is where we're trying to understand the business processes as it is today. So how is the process currently performing, and how does that relate to the customer requirements and the business requirements as set out and defined? Then in analyze, we try to understand where are the root causes of the issues, or where are the areas of improvement or opportunity that we can seek to act on. Once those are understood, we can come up with a set of improvements and prioritize those, and then deploy and implement those. And then finally, we get to control. And this is where we try to make sure that we sustain the improvements. So we don't want to just implement the improvements and hope for the best. We really want to take the time to make sure that we sustain the change and that we're not going to revert back to our old ways once the project is completed. Okay, so what this seeks to do is take us through a defined set of phases so that we can complete the project in a meaningful way. Right? And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to drive value for the customer. Right? And so one of the typical things, and we'll talk about this a lot when we talk about process mapping, the ways that we can do that is to eliminate waste in the process. And in the lean world, we use this fun acronym called TIMWOODS to help us remember the 8 different types of waste. And so essentially those are transportation, inventory, motion, waiting, overprocessing, overproduction, defects, and skills, a lack of skills. So I won't go through all of these in detail, but essentially what they are is they're cues or they're things that we look for in our processes, specifically when we're doing a process map, that we might want to seek to remove or improve upon so that we can drive more value from the customer. And so these are things we're going to want to look at as we get into our process maps. So when I talk about waste, I'm talking about these 8 different types of wastes here. Okay. So now that we've talked a little bit about Lean Six Sigma and you've got a bit of background on that, what we're going to do now is we're going to jump into process mapping. Process mapping is it's a tool in the Lean Six Sigma tool belt, but it's not only used in Lean Six Sigma. Other methodologies and many organizations complete process maps. And what it is, it's a way to define your process. And often in Lean Six Sigma, in the measure and analyze phase, the earlier phases of the project, it's a way of documenting and understanding the current state process, how it exists today, right? Not how we want it to exist, but how we complete the series of activities and who does those activities in the business today. And so what this allows us to do is understand and find where are those areas of opportunity, where are the wastes that we might seek to remove so we can provide more value to the customer. So a couple key points about process mapping. We really want to show who and what is involved in the process. So we want to define the key activities and who is responsible for those. We like to do this visually. So rather than writing out an SOP, process maps are a visual indicator of what the process looks like. And this is the benefit of when done with the group, they can clearly see the process that exists, right? They can build it with you. But it also clearly shows anytime there's a loop back, if there's a bottleneck or multiple streams condensing down to one, or maybe there's multiple decision points or levels of approval, that becomes very apparent when you look at a process map. So we like to keep this visual as it makes these things pop out, which might otherwise be hidden in an SOP. One other thing that we say is process maps should contain in-process performance and quality indicators, right? If you're familiar with the idea of lead and lag indicators, hopefully these indicators are lead indicators in the sense that they tell us an indication of how we're going to perform at the end of the process. And so these are some of the things that we often do see missing from process maps, and that's okay. but we do generally encourage you to include them if you can. So when you think about performance indicators, those are usually a measure of time, cost, or the output for the overall process. And then your quality indicators could be a measure of your defects, your rework, or your scrap for your overall process. So there's some key points in mind when building a process map. Of course, in the traditional process map, with the traditional process maps, there are lots of different types. And so you may have seen one or many of these, and you may have a preference, and that's okay. Down here on the bottom left, we can see process flow map with phases and integration points. So we can clearly see that someone's taken the time to color code by phases the series of steps. We can see just a plain process flow map here down in the bottom right, where we have a series of activities flowing into each other. And then, of course, we have the one up here, which is the cross-functional process map, sometimes referred to as a swim lane process map. And so what we have here is we have each of the different swim lanes, right? If you think of this, it kind of looks like a swimming pool with the lanes in it. So in this lane, we know exactly who is conducting those activities, all right? And so in these traditional process maps, we do like to build them with the team. We don't want to do this on our own. We want to go to the team, go to where the work is done, and really map the as-is process so that we can get a good understanding of how the process is working today. Right? We think that measure, analyze, how are we doing today? However, the other thing that's missing here, right? So this tells us, what activities are happening. We can clearly see who's doing what and when and how they flow into each other. But what we can't see is some key pieces of data, right? I don't know how long each of these activities take. I don't know, is there a big wait time? Do we have a big buildup of inventory? Right? These are good metrics that we might want to include in our process when we're trying to assess where is the waste, where is the area of opportunity. So although traditional process maps are very helpful for visualizing and understanding the process, we can take these a bit further by bringing in some data. So hold on to that thought, and we'll get to that when we get to the metrics-based process mapping. But before we do, I just want to show you a little bit bigger picture of a traditional process map. Although some of you mentioned in the chat that you have lots of experience, not everyone chimed in. So just for those of you who maybe don't have quite as much experience, right? So again, this is that swim lane or that cross-functional process map. We have some information about the process at the top here. What's the process? Who is the owner? And then we have who are the stakeholders involved in that process? And as you can clearly see from this very simple example, right, we have a starting point here at the top left, and we have a series of points where this process may end. And in between there, we have a series of steps and activities that take place before we reach the end of the process. We typically use process map terminology or specific icon set. These rectangles indicate a step in the process. Anytime you see a rectangle with these additional lines down it, that may indicate that that's a sub-process. So there could be a lot of steps involved here, right? This might have its own process map of its own, but it may not be relevant for the process map that we're looking at. And then we also have these decision blocks, and these are our diamonds and what they do is they allow us to see, can the process split? Can it go in different ways? This could be an approval. Was this approved? Yes, no. This could be around a different application type. It could be around a different product, a different grant request type, whatever that may be, right? It may go one way if it's a certain type, and it may go another way if it's a certain type. There are other icons in the typical process map icon set. I'm not going to go over them all today. If you know those ones there, you should be able to build a relatively simple process map that can visually describe your process. Now, let's take this a little bit further. Let's talk about metrics-based process mapping. Okay, so a metrics-based process map is exactly like a traditional process map, with the key exception that we bring in data. Right? This allows us to do a couple things. And so let's first define what are some of those metrics that we bring in. And so the first one is the processing time. And you can think of that as the hands-on time spent on that task or activity. We have the elapsed time, which is the total time from the start to the finish of an activity. So that allows us to capture if we may not, I may start something in the morning, but get back to it in the afternoon. So there's a longer elapsed time before I can finish that activity. We may have some waiting time in between steps, and we'll bring in a complete and accuracy rating. So that's a measure of our quality. How often is that step completed perfectly the first time without any rework? So if we think of a process, right, what do those actually look like? We have a series of activities. What is it that we do? We complete a site visit. We might have to do some information queries, pulling some information, and then we might do some reporting. And so if those activities happen in a sequence, then what we want to do is to understand what's our total time to finish that process. So this process is very simple. It's only 3 steps, so this should be pretty simple to look at. So the first thing we might have is the elapsed time, right? So I might start this site visit, today, but it'll take me 2 days before I finish it. Same with the queries, and then reporting a little bit longer. However, within those 2 days at the site visit, my processing time might not be quite as high, right? I might only spend 450 minutes on that actual site visit. So that means there's a lot of time where I'm not actually working on that site visit. That might be me working on a different product. That might be, conducting a different site visit, doing some different activities in my job, whatever that may be. And then of course we get, my animations aren't quite working there. There we go. So then we get some wait time, right? So we get some wait time in between our activities. So we can see, well, there's a 12-day wait from whenever the initial request is sent until I complete that site visit, which takes 2 days. And then there's a 4-day wait after I complete a site visit before I complete that query, which takes about 2 days. And then there's another 10-day lag before the 4 days of reporting. So what you can see down below are some summary metrics here. And so the total elapsed time where I've actually worked on the product, right? That's that 2, and that 4. That's 8 days. But of the processing time of those 8 days, right, of the 450, 180, 720, I've only actually spent 3 days working on that process. Now, when you bring in that waiting time, right, that 12, 4, and 10, that means our lead time, our time to serve, is really 34 days because we have 26 days in waiting time plus the 8 days of elapsed time. So that means from the initial request to when this process can be completed is going to be 34 days. This also allows us to look at the value-added ratio, which is a form of benchmarking. And what this allows us to do is look at the industry standard, depending on the industry you're working in, to see what that value-add ratio should be. In this example, it's 9%, meaning of the total time, 34 days, that lead time, only 3 days are spent actually working on that product or service. So that's a 9% value-add ratio. So as you can see, if we had just looked at this process as 3 simple steps, right, it wouldn't really tell us all that much. But as soon as we bring in this data, right, we bring in the processing time, the elapsed time, and the wait time, we're able to learn a lot more about this process. We can see where the big bottlenecks are. We have a 12-day wait here. We can see we've got a big gap between our 2 days of actual time working on this process step versus the actual time required, and so on. So this allows us to see a little bit further as to where those area of opportunities might lie. Right, so that's of course going to highlight where the bottlenecks are. As we saw in that previous example, we saw a 12-day lag time at the very front, so that could be a bottleneck. We saw that can also highlight the waste, right? If we think back to Tim Woods from the Lean Six Sigma methodology, anytime we see a big lead time in between steps, that waiting time, that usually indicates that there is an inventory buildup. We see waiting, right? So waiting is time spent waiting around for the product or service. So bringing in those times really allows us to see that. And then we might even see some overproduction or overprocessing. My example didn't include any of the defects, the complete inaccuracy, but I'll show you that here on some examples coming up in a minute. Bringing in the metrics also allows us to understand our total lead time. What is that time to serve, right? So that's important. If we have any service standards or service commitments, maybe that's within departments, or maybe that's to our clients, that lets us understand how we're performing in relation to those service standards. It allows us to understand our value added ratio. As I mentioned, there are industry benchmarks for different, depending on where you're at. And so by looking at your process, what you can do is understand where you are in relation to those benchmarks and whether or not you're on the leading edge, or if you're lagging behind and you might need to do some process improvement. It can sort of identify some resourcing issues. If you're seeing a big buildup in between before activity, it might be an indication that there's a resourcing issue. We can actually further enhance metrics-based process mapping to really get to the resourcing issues. And of course, within a process map, it can identify those loopbacks or any quality issues. All right, so a couple of examples. So the one I have on the screen here is an example from Eden Valley Poultry. They're a poultry processing facility in Berwick, Nova Scotia. And so we've done a number of projects with them over the last couple of years. And the one in the back left was around their inventory management of their packaging products. And so what we did is we gathered the team, and you can see all the stakeholders here. We had operations, we had Nathan, which was the individual who was in charge of tracking all of their inventory. We had a couple other individuals here as well, Rick and Colleen. We had QA, CFIA, and sales. And so we brought the team together and we created this metrics-based process map. And now I will say the metrics for this one, we actually logged on a spreadsheet as we went, just because we didn't have a lot of space here in the room that we were in, so we didn't want to make this too cluttered. But what it allowed us to do is really understand where were the bottlenecks and where did we see the wait times in the communication of the information that was required to get a PO out. And so by doing so, we were really able to understand their process and reduce that lead time so that they could get the products that they needed to package the chicken in on time. Another example, and this is just a small example here, it is cut off, was for their production processing. And so you'll see what we did is we created a metrics-based process map. And for this one, we captured not only the metrics, which are actually at the bottom of this example, but we also captured the inputs and the outputs. So further expanding even some of the information we would normally capture in a metrics-based process map to understand what spreadsheets, what tools, what systems were they using to track information. So we used some different color coding icons and some examples of what they were using and what they were pulling in each of those steps to understand how information was flowing. Another example was with Efficiency Nova Scotia, or Efficiency One. And so for them, what we did is we conducted a rapid improvement workshop. And so in this example, they were implementing a new system. And before doing so, they really wanted to take the time to streamline their processes. Otherwise, they were going to have to, do custom development within the system to meet not so streamlined processes, which is never a good idea. You should always streamline your processes before doing a new system implementation. So that's what they did, and that's what we helped them with. And so what we did is, again, we got the team together. So we had our stakeholders down here on the left, and we brought them together and we completed this metrics-based process map over the span of a morning. And you'll actually see at the bottom, again, we had the metrics in a timeline view here. And they actually had two different types of applications that they were going through this process. And so we just used it because they followed the same process. We were able to just use different times, different processing time, different elapsed time, different complete inaccuracy ratings, and different inputs and outputs along the bottom here. So what we were able to do from this was identify some improvements and then, of course, go on to implement those improvements so that when they did implement their new system, they had streamlined processes that were much easier to implement into their new technology. And then the next example here is not a project that I specifically did, but I have another example, an extension of this that I really do want to show you as how you can take metrics-based process mapping even further. So this is an example with Nova Scotia Crown Lending. And just like the examples you saw before, what we have here is a metrics-based process map. So along the left, right, where we have each of our activities, which is the processing time, the elapsed time, and the complete and accuracy rating. We have the labor resource. We have the person who is responsible for that activity. And so that you can see that each role in its swim lane, right, clearly has those activities. So we can visually see that just by looking at this metrics-based process map. Now this data here, right, is that's what's the key data for our metrics-based process map, so we can really understand where are those bottlenecks and where are the waste within this process. Okay. Now, we can actually take this a little bit further. So as was mentioned before the presentation, although metrics-based process map is an enhancement to the traditional process mapping, you can take that even further, and it's really the predecessor to doing any sort of business modeling or simulation. And so that's how it integrates with business process analysis and costing. So, right, just like in our metrics-based process map, we have our process activities. So we have the information we went over before. So we have our, elapsed time, we have our processing time, and our wait time. So we collect that information just like we would have before, except what we do when we want to take this a little bit further is with business process analysis and costing, what we can do is we can really capture a little bit more information and take it further to truly model this process. What we can do is we can bring in the customer demands. So, these could be, different types of, of loan applications, or these could be different types of chickens with Eden Valley Poultry, or different types of products, right? These are your demands that go to your activities. What products and services we supply, those are really your demands. And to complete those, right, you have to go through a series of processes. And now if we take that up a level, right, we go up, what we can do is look at if we have our demands and we know the total processing time, right, the hands-on time required to complete that activity, what we can do is we can actually model the utilization. What's the percentage of our available capacity of our resources? So in this example, this could be our field team or of any equipment that we might actually have. And that could be additional equipment or assets, or that could be building or other assets such as that. You can even take it as far to include external contractors or external partners. So this allows us to understand what is our utilization. And then if we bring in the financial data of those resources, what we're able to do is actually able to calculate our cost to serve. So you can actually work out what is your cost per unit of work. So that could be, your dollars per call, your dollars per report, or you can take it down to the demand level. What is the cost per unit of output? Your dollar per assessment. Right? So this business process modeling that we're doing with BPOC really stems off well from the metrics-based process mapping. Right? A lot of the inputs, your processing time and your complete and accuracy rating, if that involves extra rework, right, those activities can also be modeled into this process model. And so that's why it's a predecessor to doing any sort of process modeling or simulation. So to show you that and show you what that looks like, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull back up. This is that Nova Scotia Crown Lending example that we saw earlier. And this is actually built in CBP. So that's an application built on QualiWare, as I'm sure many of you know. And so what this is that metrics-based process map that you saw on that whiteboard with sticky notes, but this time it's actually been built into the application CBP. And so each of these activities you can think of as a sticky note, okay? And it has a processing time, it has a lead time or elapsed time, and it has a complete and accuracy rating. It also has the labor resource. So that's the, think of your swim lane, the person or resource that is completing that work. And then, of course, we can even bring in the number of staff in that position and how much capacity each of those individuals would have, so that we can do that process modeling. And I will say, as a quick aside, Mike and I have actually been doing, we completed our most recent workshop with Veterans Affairs using CBP as the modeling tool. So we did that right away. We actually didn't use, we didn't use Visio, we didn't use Sticky Board and Whitenote. We actually built the value stream map or the metrics-based process map as we went, right? So we did this in CBP live during the workshop. And Mike, I'll let you comment at the end there, but I actually think it went quite well. So as you can see, the benefit, of course, to doing this in the software is all these calculations, this timeline here, the total processing time and the lead time, your total lead time, your total processing time, that value added ratio, and even your roll throughput yield, which is just the product of all of your complete and accuracy ratings. So that would be a measure of how often an application or a loan is going through this process, complete and accurate without any rework. And that's only 7%, so that's quite low. Keeping in mind, this is all demo data. This is not real data. And so this all comes in together and allows us to do that business process analysis and costing. We can fill in some of the extra information, so the demands and the financials, and that really allows us to use our metrics-based process mapping as the backbone for business process analysis and costing. And of course, this is great because we can take this data and we can do all sorts of what-if analysis, and we can run lots of different simulations and understand, oh, well, if we were to change who does this activity or add a resource here, then what's the outcome of that going to be? And of course, we can export all that information into a BI tool like Power BI here, and we're able to break down, for a specific type of loan, what percentage of time is being spent on that actual, on those loans by labor resource, or we could even break it down to the activity level and see how our resources time being spent on each of those activities. So I hope that's a quick demo. I'm looking at the time here, and so I'm gonna try and wrap this up, but I hope that you can see that metrics-based process mapping is truly an enhancement to traditional process mapping, not only from understanding where the areas of opportunity is, but it also enables you to do this process mapping or process modeling and costing, which takes this to a whole new level. It really does allow you to understand what would the projected benefits of these improvements be, which of course can help you build your business case if there's any capital investment required for those improvements, and really prioritize and understand which improvements you should focus on. Okay. That's a bit of a taste of how that all comes together. Kevin mentioned this already, but if you do want to learn more, there are a couple of training opportunities coming up. So you can, if you're interested in these, I can send out the slides, which have the links to each of the courses here above. But we have the Enhancing Lean with Business Process Analysis and Costing. So we'll take you through the techniques and the methodology that Mike and I have used. And that's on December 14th to 16th. It's 3 consecutive half-day sessions, so those are in the afternoon. And of course, there's also the CBP modeler and the Implementing Business Process Analysis and Costing. I won't go anymore because I'm definitely at the end of my time looking at my timer here, and I know that Kevin mentioned these already, so I'll wrap it up. I don't know, do we have any time for questions? I don't want to make it.
Yeah,
okay.
no, we definitely do. Thank you, Logan, absolutely. And we do have a question. So folks, if you do have questions for Logan, either raise your hand or pop it into the chat. Francois is asking, will QualiWare support, oh, this might not be a question for you, Logan, it might be more of a question for Kevin. Will QualiWare support process simulation to drive time and total costs of different scenarios?
Actually, that is the purpose for the collaborative based planning tool.
Right, the CBP tool, of course.
Yeah, so that That tool allows you to build out different models with different resourcing and processing costs, and look at it from a resource constraint point of view, as well as unit and total service delivery costs. Now that's an add-on to the base QualiWare tool set. Within QualiWare itself, there are some of those rudimentary capabilities for doing that as well. Again, it depends on the type of model that you're using, but QualiWare, for example, can calculate critical paths based on start and end, slack, that type of thing as well. And that capability is actually built into the base tool set. What CBP offers is a more comprehensive solution, shall we say, in terms of modeling out and comparing those different scenarios.
Great. Thank you, Kevin. Francois, did you have anything else that you wanted to ask? Okay, great. Thank you very much. Other questions for Logan about what we've seen this afternoon, or anything else for that matter? Give everybody a chance to think about it or type their question in.
So I just have actually a comment about that last question. I know that some departments in the past have used iGraphics as a way of doing their simulation. And interestingly, we've had people who've looked at iGraphics and then looked at the the enhanced capabilities offered through CBP, and they say there's no comparison in terms of the additional information that's available through the CBP add-on.
And just to add to that, Kevin, I have used some, I've done other simulation softwares in the past, and CBP really does allow you to take control of those different scenarios that you want to run. It's very easy to do so and produce, powerful and meaningful outputs that are really easy to understand for the technical ones that are building the models, but also for management as well. That's so they can understand what would the impact of these changes be, and why or why not we might want to pursue them. So I've really enjoyed using it, and plan to keep on using it as my tool of choice moving forward. That's for sure.
Great. Thank you very much, Logan. If there are no further questions, thank you. Oh, wait, now. Oh, Francois is asking, what is CBP? Mike, would you like to jump in?
I've been biting my tongue. Yeah, it's Francois, collaborative business planning. That's the module Kevin mentioned on top of QualiWare that we've been developing the last few years.
Francois,
we can reach out to you separately from this meeting to give you some additional information and to point you in the right direction to give you some more information about that. There are several very good videos that we have available to us, and we'll point you to the CBP website too. So.
Great, and I'll do that. Francois says thank you, and so we'll send you some additional information for you to have a look at. Thank you. Okay. Anybody else? Questions for Logan? Okay, great. Logan, Mike Hart says great presentation. Thank you. Just in case you didn't see that in the chat. Okay, I think that we are wrapped up with Logan. If there are any other questions that come up, if you think about something after the fact, please feel free to pop it into the chat, and we can always follow up separately. Thank you very much, Logan, for your time. Really appreciate it. Very interesting topic, and really appreciate you joining us today. You're welcome to stay if you wish, but you're under no obligation to do so. So thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it.
No worries. Thank you so much. Really enjoyed being here today.
Okay, next on my list is next on our agenda today is James Cheong from CBSA, and James is going to give us an update on what the CBSA team has been working on. He wasn't able to join us in our meeting in September when we had some of our other government clients give us some updates. So James has graciously agreed to join us here. So James, I'm going to hand things over to you, and we can get started.
Yep. Thank you, Cecile.
Okay.
Let's see. Okay.
Let's see how this goes.
Well, first time I'm trying to share the screen with this. Do you see it now?
Yes, we do.
Showing?
Good job.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep. Good. Thanks.
Oh, good afternoon, everyone. Like Cecile was saying, I missed the previous session where everybody gave, I guess, a 5 minutes description of what has been happening throughout the summer. So today's my turn. So let's go on the next slide. Let me see. Go. So we've been busy, I guess everybody as well. So what have we done so far? And again, this year, our main goals usually are around the summertime or late summer is to work on the Treasury Board submission for APM. So this year we've done some refinements to the content that we usually assess on. A lot of, not a lot, but a few of the content has moved into what we call the core architecture portions. So the information just comes directly as part of the features, and any updates will the APM reps will need to pretty much go and talk to the areas that are in charge of maintaining that kind of content. So those are the main changes that has happened, and we refined and adjusted a bit the governance workflow for that. So this year was completed on time. There was not a lot of hiccups compared to other years, but as usual, there's always something to update and fix. So that's in essence one of the activities we're busy on. The other aspect or project that we had is to migrate our IT area, what we call the digital product directory. Is a directory that helps us manage and classify the various IT assets where the releases are affecting on, and what kind of projects they work on, and when and new applications that comes in needs to be classified and organized properly. Initially, that catalog of applications was in a document format, and it was a bit harder to govern and maintain because as new applications or assets comes in, as you know, it needed to be updated, regoverned, create a PDF and whatnot. So the decision was to also help them that area so that they can manage better the catalog, and at the same time help us also organize our IT assets inside QualiWare. So that was done over the summer. The content has been loaded, which is usually our phase one, is to load the content and make it more accessible to everybody. The next phase is ongoing now, is to engage with the various stakeholders so that they know when the content needs to be maintained, and also provide them the access and the governance features that they need in order for them to keep the content up to date. There's only a partial portion of that directory that has been onboarded. There's still work that will need to happen in order to onboard other areas of the directory that hasn't been engaged so far. So this will be an ongoing part of our development, but the bigger piece has been done at this point. One other area that we have also moved into right now is to enhance our architecture program at CBSA, at the enterprise architecture program at CBSA. I need to be more specific on this. We're currently working on implementing the enterprise architecture assessments through QualiWare as well. We will be using the governance workflow engine a lot for this. For example, we like to have an aging process, and after a certain number of days that an assessment has been assigned to a enterprise architect, one of the SMEs they will eventually also have a reminder through aging in GWE to notify them that the elapsed time has occurred, and they only have so many days left to complete their assessment. So this will help us also streamline and manage all the different intake processes and helping the project areas as well as the development area, release area, so that we can streamline the various assessments that are happening that requires an enterprise architecture review of those, and it will make also all that activity visible to the rest of the agency. Okay. Any questions so far?
I think James,
Yes.
I think JR has his hand up.
JR
Oh.
does. Yeah.
You promised you were not going to say anything.
I know, but I couldn't find my mute button before. Anyway, that's a quickie.
Okay. Yeah. Yes.
Your stakeholders in your DPD, are you going to use QualiWare Web, or are you going to use the thick client?
We're moving toward web because it's too much power for what they need.
Yeah.
I guess that's a quick answer.
Yeah, so you are going to use the website for that.
Yes, same for the CBSI architecture program. We're using the web portion to manage the what we call as assessment. Is a series of questionnaire that comes in and is managed by our CBSI architecture program. We call them CAP. And because there's a time box in between a request for an assessment, the comments going back, and to keep the process moving, we'll leverage, like I was saying before, we'll use the aging options in governance workflow to enable us to have fewer notifications as well as sending reminders when things are happening.
Do you mind giving a demo on that?
Oh, sure. Yeah, no, that's not a problem. Like I said, we're still under development, but once everything is more finalized, I do plan to at least show it at the GOC community practice.
Oh, that'd be perfect.
Already talked to the manager in that area that where the main requirements are coming from. We do the development, the requirements come from them. But yeah, that's something we're looking into in the future.
Thanks, James.
So just as a note for people as well, that web interface, the website side that they're talking about, is accessible from a user with an architect license or a plus license, collaboration plus license.
There will be mostly collaboration and plus license, yeah.
Yeah, of which CBSA has both, but they're also an enterprise collaboration client as well.
Correct, yeah.
So they have a web collaboration license for every employee.
Yeah, that facilitates an ease up on all this information sharing that is happening. So this is, I guess, and on this slide, it pretty much is what we're working on or plan to work on in the next little while. So currently, our enterprise business architecture team is preparing to onboard some of their clients. As you may be aware of, they have been working on a lot of their content for the past 2, 3, 4 years, and we're pretty much approaching the time where it's the handoff portion of all this work, and that's the ongoing effort that is happening now. And this will be also a learning process for everybody, because normally at this point we only had mostly architects and users that have been very close to our team. So now we're branching out. So it's going to be quite a journey for us. And a change in our pace on this. So there will be a lot of new really business users instead of IT users. Okay, so that's one aspect of that. What else? Yeah, and that brings up the other activities that we're embarking on, is to expand our plus licenses for this and next fiscal. So that's work in progress. The other reason we also try to keep up with the latest versions, because we are really looking into leveraging the web portion of QualiWare in order to enable us to onboard additional client users. And that's the reason we are working on testing version 10.4.2, the latest and greatest. And yeah, that's all I guess I want to mention on that, because it's still a lot of effort put into the verification of the new version. And this is our plan. We are currently in 10.4.0, and the goal is to move to the latest 10.4.2 or whichever is available when we start the actual upgrade.
Christmas is coming soon, huh? 10.5.
Yeah, I know. It looks 10.5. Well, last year we had we waited for 10.4 for what, 4 to 5 months, and then we have our internal process that took another 2 months.
But we had a promise, did we not? Of 10.5 before year end?
Well,
Poor
you have to
Jacob.
talk to the Danish Santa Claus about that one.
Poor
it
Jacob.
depends on what is available. Yeah, we will try to squeeze in as much as we can on the latest version, because as you know, the upgrade process internally is quite heavy.
Mm-hmm.
So
We actually do have some meetings with QualiWare set up in December, so we will try to get everyone an update on the version 10.5 status before Christmas. A little present for you, JR.
I liked it last year.
Yeah, I saw your comment last year in there. Okay, so that's pretty much the quick updates on the main activities what we have been doing at CBSA. Any more additional questions?
Anybody has any questions for James? Jump in now. Thank you so much, James, for taking the time to share that with us. It sounds like you guys have really accomplished a lot and have even more on your plate. So
yes,
congratulations, and good luck and good with all the other things that you're going to be working on. So thanks very much for sharing that with us today. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right. While I'm doing this, I see that somebody put something in the chat. And, James, are you still there? There was a question from Carol from
yes, I'm still
ESTC.
here.
Okay, Carol from ESTC is asking, how are you importing APM data?
Actually, we did the initial import a couple years ago, and ever since then, we've just been updating the content as needed, and then doing an export from QualiWare and then submit it to Treasury Board. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, it does a little bit. Are you using the information system template to import the APM data? Like how?
Not in that sense. We have our own CBSA meta model that we work with. So there's some content that if we have completed the development on those portions, it would, that's why I was referring to the core, our architecture core. So there will be some content that belongs to the architecture core that goes there. Anything that we're still in work in progress mode, we have a separate assessment template for that type of content.
Okay. All right.
So we're not using the information system object.
In answer to your question, though, about the information system template, that's the that template and a couple of others linked to it are typically the ones used for APM data. So, for example, when we were taking our CMP spreadsheet, which had something on the order of 300 columns of information, we use that template as well as a number of others to link together with that template to transfer their information from that spreadsheet into QualiWare. And that was done through multiple passes of GTI, as well as some QCL work as well.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Carol, for your question. Okay. We are at the final item on our agenda today, which is a QualiWare tooltip from Dragos in our customer success team. And Dragos is going to take us through what things look like from an end user's point of view in governance workflow. So, Dragos, I'm going to hand things over to you.
Thanks, Cecile. So yeah, it's a good coincidence that James brought up governance workflows on the web, because the subject that I'll be talking about today is using governance workflows from an end user perspective on the web. So while documentation and training exists out there around setting up governance workflows in QualiWare, one area that users have pointed out that needs more exploration is in the actual use of those workflows from an end user perspective, start to finish. So we know how to set them up, but we don't know.
You see a screen here?
Yes, I'll be sharing my screen shortly.
Okay.
I just have to have this beginning blurb that I'm getting through. So what do governance workflows do? Well, at a sort of in a general context, they allow organizations to use repeatable business processes to orchestrate how data is entered, validated, and how respective changes are approved. So this results in high quality data, policy compliance, user collaboration, and of course, change awareness across the organization. In other words, it's a controlled development lifecycle of sorts for various types of items in your organization. And in the context of QualiWare, the purpose of a governance workflow, of which, by the way, there are about 20 or so predefined out-of-the-box workflows that you can, you work straight away with. So the purpose of the governance workflow is to enable tailored governance solutions for different types of objects in your repository. It contains and allows you to model a combination of governance roles and governance states. The governance states are placed inside a governance role so that only whoever is acting under that role can action on the states. And those governance states are connected by governance transitions, which in turn also have governance action methods appended to them. So those are things that allow you to, maybe automatically fill in a certain attribute or send out a notification email. And there's also a few other things like governance event messages and conditional action methods and all that. So with that in mind, today I'm going to take you to our compliance management accelerator repository, which we're in the process of building. And as a disclaimer, everything here is a work in progress. One second. Whoops, am I sharing the right screen here?
I have a blue screen.
There we go.
Now we have a QualiWare screen. Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to take you through our, in progress compliance management accelerator repository. And I will first show you what some of the out-of-the-box workflows look like. And, we'll go over some of the high-level functionality, and we'll have just to get a general sense of how they're supposed to work. And then for the rest of the demo, with help from Kirill, I'm going to walk you through one of our custom governance workflows that we've set up for corrective action objects in the repository, from its inception to the retirement of that corrective action. So here we have sort of the set of standard out-of-the-box governance workflows. Some of these are very familiar to you. So there's workflows for handling documents, for handling process diagrams, resources and assets. Here's the one for that most of you might be familiar with, the change management workflow. This is for instance, business process networks and workflow diagrams. We have 4 distinct roles which have access to different stages within the governance workflow. And we can see the roles, we can see the governance states, and these little arrows that are connecting them are called governance transitions. So the thick green arrows are sort of the default path that the default governance path that it would take. The first option that pops up when you're in development status is to move it to finished. And as alternate paths, you could also go into the expand the options and have access to the circulation and or move it straight to ready for approval or finished. Let's go over another example. Here we have a complaint management workflow that has 2 roles: the originator, the individual who created the complaint item. That might be different from the customer that had a complaint. But the originator, gets to create the complaint object and assign a responsible and move it between 2 statuses. So we could either go to announcement or handling. In either path, when you move, when you change your governance state to one in a different role, now you no longer have access. So if I move from registration to handling, what happens is the governance state changes to handling, and the individual, the originator who's marked as responsible, would be getting a notification message. So this is what this little icon represents. By the same token, when the responsible is in, brings the object to finish state and they want to close it or retire it, there's a message that gets sent out. And so these are all part of governance action methods. You can set up, little message templates or little functionality. Like here, the closed by date would be set automatically, and so sorry, the closed date and the closed who closed it would be defined automatically when the object is moved from finish to close. Let's look at another one. So here's an out-of-the-box corrective action management workflow. And for the purposes, so, there's two in here. Sometimes in some of those workflow diagrams, we may see multiple responsible roles. This happens when it leaves you the option, if the individual responsible for handling may not necessarily be the individual responsible for implementing it. So that's why there's, that's why these may be distinct. But for the purposes of our compliance management accelerator repository, this corrective action management workflow wasn't sufficient for us. So we went ahead and created our own governance workflow for corrective action management. Capability-wise, it doesn't do anything more or less than any of the other workflows. It's just set up with custom steps that ensure compliance to the ISO 9000 standard. And this is the way that we've chosen to be compliant, because it's straightforward and it's transparent. Other people, other organizations, they may take different approaches. They may use the out-of-the-box workflow and then append all kinds of documentation that's related to ISO standard requirements. But we've chosen to make a custom governance workflow. And by taking you through this workflow, which I will shortly, you get a sense of how to do it from start to finish, and hopefully gain a high-level understanding of how to use workflows from an end-user perspective. So I'm going to create a corrective action, and with the help of Kirill, I'm going to walk you through from start to finish through this workflow, and we'll see how it how it gets done. So I'm going to hop over to nonconformance. Typically, corrective actions are born out of nonconformances. So there is a create corrective action button here. So I'm going to press that. And here in this creation dialog, I have a few mandatory fields like the title and the responsible. I'm going to assign Kirill as the responsible because we'll be going back and forth to the governance workflow together. Whoops. And of course, I can fill out some details. I can attach some external file attachments or some external links in the associated documents. Typically, the nonconformance that you create a corrective action out of is automatically populated here. And you can also associate your corrective action to perhaps some goals that are relevant to it. So now that I've created it, I'm going to save and go back into my nonconformance. And in the corrective actions to nonconformance tab, I can see the one I just created here. So I'm going to navigate to it. And here I can take actions on it. So currently, I can see what stage, if I'm relevant to this workflow, if I'm part of this workflow as somebody who created it, or I was marked as the accountable or responsible, then I'll have access to some of the functionality in this workflow, and including these buttons. So what is that ready for CA plan response button? Well, that allows me to move from the CA assigned, which is the default sort of state, to the respond with corrective action plan. So now, as the originator, I can assign a responsible, which also is interchangeable with owner. And once I move it to this status, now the responsible, in this case Kirill, will have to respond with a corrective action plan. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to say ready for CA plan response. Again, that's going to move us from CA assigned to respond with corrective action. And as you can see, the governance sort of workflow diagram button and any functionality related to the governance state is now invisible to me because now whatever other action that has to be taken on that corrective action falls within Kyril's role. So we'll go back over to the corrective action management workflow diagram so that you can see now Cyril has to submit a corrective action plan and press a button in the same place that I did to move it from CA assigned to respond with corrective action. So now I've moved it to Cyril, and I'm going to pass the screen on to Cyril. Cecile, can you help me with that, please?
Yep, I was going to say, I think maybe I have to do that. All right. Carol, over to you.
Thanks, Cecile. All right, so now you can see my screen. I have actually received an email from Dragos saying that I'm right now responsible for a corrective action. So the content of this particular email can be customized depending on your business needs. In this case, you can see the hyperlink, which brings me right to the corrective action that Dragos created. So in 15 seconds, we should see that. All right, so now we see the corrective action that was created by Dragos. Couple of things. On the right side, you can actually see an exclamation mark, which is going to explain the governance workflow status it is in right now. So you see the status have changed from CA assigned to respond with corrective action, which I'm responsible for, so I need to take care of it. Now, at this point, I have only one action available. The action is CA plan ready for approval. Once I press that, the governance history should be updated, and Dragos will receive an email saying that I've done some work on the corrective action. So I've done that. If you go to the governance history here, you will actually see 3 entries. The first one is Dragos actually assigned the CA. Then he also he sent me the corrective action into my hands, into my responsibility, and I basically approved a CA plan. So now the ball is back at Dragos's responsibility to decide whether he approves or denies this CA plan.
I'm not going to show you this, guys, this part, but I will just say that I'm going into the same place that I went to change status, and there's a drop-down menu, and I'm going to just reject his CA plan for now. So now it's rejected, and Cyril can refresh the page. So you notice before he didn't have access to the governance functionality, and once he refreshes, he will, because now again the task is in his role.
So you actually get an email whenever you get rejected or the information gets approved. You can see here there is the information on a denial. Then again, I would press a hyperlink, or I could use the same one and refresh it in the browser. And I will click on the governance status again, and you see it's back to the second status. You can also see the governance history to identify, well, it wasn't actually a bug, but Dragos actually denied me the corrective action. So he said something is not working out, so please, prepare the plan ready for approval again. And we're going to do it one more time. And hopefully this time the process will go through an entire chain of governance stages.
So Cecile, if you mind switching the screen back to me.
Sure.
All right. So as you guys can see, I've received an email saying that the corrective action plan is now ready for approval. So I'm going to navigate back to my QualiWare window, and so as you can see here, now we're in the approval stage. I either have to approve or reject it again. Rejecting it, of course, will bring us back to respond with corrective action, but this time, Cyril's done some satisfactory work, and so I'm going to validate that. And now it's back in So now we're going to look at the governance history. I've moved it from approval of CA plan to implement CA. So that this is a governance state that is in his role. Therefore, again, I don't have access to the governance workflow or any governance actions until he finishes his task.
Yeah, and I got an email, and it actually saying that the corrective action has been approved this time. And then when I go to the corrective action in the web, now I have an option to move it to ready for verification. And I will press that, and that should update the history of the governance of this particular object. Back to you, Dragos.
So now I'm just going to refresh my page. I get an email as well, and I can click on the link in an email, but I'm just going to refresh my page for now. So now that Kirill has submitted his CA implementation, it's my responsibility to do a couple of validations. First, I have to verify that the implementation itself has been done adequately and to our standards, and then I have to verify whether that implementation is effective. So for all intents and purposes, I'm just going to validate the implementation, and also, so now you see we've moved from here till here, and here I have the option of either rejecting the effectiveness of the corrective action implementation, in which case we'd go all the way back to Kirill having to resubmit his corrective action plan. But I'm not that mean, so I'm just gonna hit CA is effective and closed. And as we can see here, we have the entire list of governance status changes from the point of assignment to the point it was closed. We can see where it says respond with corrective action plan again that I've also rejected, and then we've gone through and repeated some of those governance stages. And that's it. That's that's all I have for you guys. In conclusion, there is a lot of documentation and how-tos on how to set up the governance workflows, but not a lot on what it looks like from the perspective of the parties who are actually using the workflows. So we wanted to show you that, and on top of providing some sort of basic or high-level understanding of the mechanics of governance workflows. And we'll also be making a video for this, and it'll be posted on our YouTube a bit later. Are there any questions?
I don't want to use emails. Do I have a list somewhere of things that are outstanding that I have to do?
There is, but I'm not sure that we have it set up yet. So in compliance, you would have it in my corrective actions list, for instance. Any corrective action that pertains to you or that you've been involved in at some point. The reason that you see all of these, even though I made my name may not currently be appended to them, is because I was involved in creating, or I was responsible or accountable for all of these at some stage.
Now you can also have a different tile which would be called to do, and you would actually have entire available, different objects to which you need to do some sort of actions. Not necessarily my corrective actions, but entire list of QualiWare objects which you might need to approve, deny, or comment, provide the feedback. And then the other thing is, whenever you see the governance history, you could also don't just deny the information or approve it, you can also provide some comments and feedback. And that will be a part of the history as well, which is very useful.
So we could add a comment here as we're developing the object as well.
Thank you very much, guys. Rob and Dan from CRA say thank you very much. Very interesting. I think CRA might be exploring some of this in the next little while, so that's great. Any questions? Any other questions for Dragos or Kirill regarding the governance workflow? All right. If there are, please feel free to jump in while I fix my screen sharing. Thanks very much, Dragos. Kirill, appreciate your efforts into putting that together for us. That was great. Okay, we have come to the end of our November QualiWare Users Group meeting. I would like to say thank you very much to everyone. And as Kevin mentioned earlier, wish everybody all the best for the upcoming holiday season and Happy New Year, because the next time we meet, it will be January 2022. And hopefully 2022 will be a better year than 2021. And we will see you on the 31st of January, same time, possibly a different place, because as Kevin mentioned, we are looking at Microsoft Teams webinars as our platform. But definitely same time in January, and I hope everybody has a great rest of your day, and we'll see you in, I guess, a couple of months now. Thanks very much, everybody, for your time and for your participation in our meeting today.